Hi, my name's Warren. I'm one of the co-founders at 33 Shake, and welcome to another episode of the 33 Shake vlog, where today we are looking at dairy and athletic performance. Because for so long, milk, cheese, yogurt, they've been at the centre of what we perceive to be a healthy diet that we don't even question them at all. And this feeling is backed up by a lot of industry-funded campaigns like Got Milk, which is the campaign that's very popular in America, or Make Mine Milk, which was the UK version of the same thing. But for quite a long time now, the evidence against dairy being good for health and performance is really starting to stack up. So today we are going to be weighing that evidence. Why all that emphasis on weighing? Because it was like a play on words. Whey as in whey protein, which is dairy product, as opposed to the word weighing. I know, look, it was pretty bad, but stick with us. I promise it will get better. We're going to be weighing the evidence in this argument and looking at what it means for your performance, but also looking at if you do decide that you'd like to reduce dairy, well, how can you go about it easily and quickly? Because if you do want to do it, it's really not that hard. Because frankly, at 33 Shake, as you may know if you've watched any of these before, our mission is about bringing maximum value to endurance athletes. And we do it in these videos by sharing the very latest in training, mindset, nutrition, tips and tricks for your racing and performance. And we do it in store at 33shake.com with our awesome natural sports nutrition. Now, with that said, let's get on with the show. So, where to begin? Let's start with the delightful subject of drugs, hormones, and illness. What a lovely place to start. Because industrially produced milk, industrially produced dairy milk, which is basically 95% of the milk that's on the market, comes from animals that are often not very well. And if they are well, it's because they're being pumped with a lot of antibiotics and other medication in order to keep them functional, at least, in what are often, well, they're always crowded conditions, but often they're not very sanitary either. So these animals are in close proximity. I mean, just think about it. You get a cold, you don't want to go on the London Underground, or at least you don't want to be on the London Underground sitting next to someone who's got a cold. But at least on the London Underground, you can get off. Dairy cow with a cold, no chance. Can't get off, can't get away from the other 500 or whatever cows that are going to be crammed in next to it. So they need to keep any sort of disease down. That means a lot of antibiotics and drugs for the cows. But on top of that, how does a cow produce milk? It needs to be pregnant. A cow is not naturally permanently pregnant. So there's a lot of hormones going into these cows to keep them permanently pregnant. Now, this is all simply a fact of industrial milk production. What does it mean for us? Well, a part of those hormones and those drugs, that's coming through in that milk. That on its own is a reason to think twice about drinking milk. Links to serious disease. Yeah, I know, this really gets cheery, doesn't it? So there have been major studies showing strong links between dairy consumption and cancer since the 1950s, it's not that long, since the 1970s, with a particular focus on prostate cancer, gentlemen. So for anyone who'd rather reduce their cancer risk, which I think is just about everyone, but particularly us guys, as we get on a bit, prostate cancer is a massive one for male early mortality. And a lot of studies are showing a link between that and the dairy. There's also a strong link between dairy and incidence of autoimmune diseases, particularly arthritis. Milk proteins, whether they're from milk, yogurt, cheese, or whey protein, are the main culprits for this one. There's an increased arthritis risk there. And in short, cancer and arthritis, they're two things that never made anyone faster, unless of course that was in making them faster to get to the serious diseases or illnesses ward of the nearest hospital. Not really a place any of us want to go. Now, here's another one. Milk doesn't build your bones. Now, clearly, anyone who's ever known anything about milk and dairy and as a whole will be saying, what the bloody hell are you talking about? Because milk means healthy bones. Bones need calcium. Milk contains calcium. Therefore, milk is good for bones, right? Must be. Well, it's a logical sense, but an increasing body of scientific evidence is saying not actually the case. One of the big ones taking this out is a study that shows increased milk consumption is linked to increased bone fractures. And the really big one is that the regions in the world with the highest concentration of dairy consumption, really we're talking about North America and Northern Europe, they also have the highest levels of osteoporosis. Flip this one on its head. Countries with the lowest levels of dairy consumption, Africa, India, Japan, they have the lowest levels of osteoporosis. It's a bit of a trend, and it seems to go both ways there. And the reason that there is a link between dairy and osteoporosis is that dairy products contain a high level of something called D-galactose. And this, in animals at least, it has been proven that this can accelerate aging. It can also increase chronic inflammation, and it can decrease immune response while shortening lifespan. Awesome! Now, clearly this is in animals. So there is a question mark, does this pass on to humans or not? But if you then put it against the evidence that's also showing that there's the higher incidence of osteoporosis in countries with an increased dairy consumption as opposed to the flip side on the countries that take less, the picture is starting to build a little bit. And so if you look at all this, well, should I be getting off the dairy completely? There's several ways to look at this. No reason why you should bin dairy completely or even at all if you don't want to. And you could always look at this and say, well, that evidence says dairy's not so good, but there's all this other evidence that says it is good. It's the classic Mail on Sunday type scenario where on one day you read that, let's say, red wine gives you cancer, and 2 days later you read that red wine's actually really good for you. So what are we supposed to believe? There will be an equal amount. Right? You can spend your life sifting this evidence instead. Why not just use some common sense instead? There's an equal amount of apparently equally high quality evidence on both sides of the argument, which at best means that you can say, or at worst of these things, that there is a 50% chance that this stuff is bad for you. And this is where the argument, certainly we would find at 33 Shake, this is where the argument starts to gain a lot of credence for dropping milk. Because what is the consequence of dropping milk and dairy from your diet? Well, basically it's nothing, as we'll see with these steps. It's really easy to do, and you're not missing any nutrients at all. Whereas if you keep it, if you then assume that 50% of the evidence says it's fine and 50% of the evidence says it's really quite bad for you, well, you're now taking a 50% punt at best on increased risk of cancer, osteoporosis, arthritis, and things like that. And for us, it's not a good deal. If this was a financial investment, no one would take it. 50% massive downside. Whereas if you remove the dairy, it's all upside for nothing. So if you thought, well, based on this, maybe I'll give it a go. Here's how you could do it. First of all, you want to swap all of your milk for milk substitutes. Now, this used to mean going and finding the one shop within a 30-mile radius, normally run by someone with a beard and sandals and probably dubious personal hygiene, and filled with the kind of people you'd normally possibly cross the road to avoid, in order that you could find some hemp milk or some oat milk. But thanks to so much more awareness about dairy and genuine consumer demand, it is as easy as going to the local supermarket and going, well, I won't buy the milk, I'll buy the almond milk or the oat milk or the soy milk or whatever it is. There are at least 5 varieties found in any major supermarket now. Makes it really easy to get rid of milk. So that's the first step. Now, next bit. One quick note on soy milk. Yes, it's a very good and viable alternative milk. However, soy as a commodity is one of the most genetically modified ingredients out there, which means that if you are going for a soy option, make sure it is organic and non-GMO. This is not simply about being posh and weird with labels. Genuinely with soy, it really matters. Soy is a great ingredient, but only when you're assured that it's non-GMO and organic. So with that note, let's go on. Next thing, go nuts with the blender. Another great play on words here, because if you look at most almond milk, look at the ingredients on a packet of almond milk. It's basically water with a little bit of almonds in it. We tried to unpick that recipe in our own personal journeys here at 33 Shake when we started to remove dairy a few years ago, which, by the way, has worked really well for us. And we thought, well, we could probably do this at home. If you've got a high-power blender, chuck a cup of water in, 4 or 5 almonds per cup of water, spin on high power. Bingo, you're going to get something that looks like milk coming out of it. Now, you can pour this straight into porridge. If you're using it in coffee and tea, just one note, it's probably going to separate and look a bit weird. So, particularly when mixing it with coffee, one of the best things to do is pour the coffee and the milk once it's all hot, put it back in the blender, spin it again, and this has the added benefit of bringing the whole thing out like a really frothy cappuccino. And it's a really, really tasty and sensible, useful alternative there. Now, you will get some little bits of nuts at the bottom of this if you choose to make your almond milk this way, but what's wrong with that? Almonds are right tasty and kind of good for you too. You will find a lot of websites out there telling you that if you want to do your own almond milk, you've got to strain it through cheesecloth, and frankly, life is too short for all that nonsense. If you have the patience for that, all power to you, but if you don't, honestly, just spinning it, some almonds, some water in a blender, bingo. What about the cheese? Well, I tell you what, getting rid of the cheese or substituting cheese is one of the biggest hurdles that we found commonly for anybody who thinks they want to reduce or even remove their dairy consumption altogether. So how do you do it? Well, first of all, good news. Having been on this track personally myself for several years, it's much, much easier now. Major high street chains, Pret a Manger, Pizza Express, a lot of the main supermarkets, you're already going to find a lot of vegan sandwiches and pizza options in there. So, really nice pizzas with no cheese on them. Good alternatives that get you that kind of savory, tangy mouthfeel from cheese. Avocados are a good one. They don't quite have the tang, but they've got the mouthfeel and that hit of fat. Whereas the hummus is another great alternative as well. So you're going to have to start going off piste a bit, but once you worked out what your substitutes are, you find you're not going to miss cheese much at all. Okay, whey protein. Clearly this is a dairy product. If you remember Little Miss Muffet, she sat on her tuffet eating her curds and whey. This is a byproduct of milk production. Best way to think of whey protein is to think of it as no whey protein, as in no way am I going to put that in my body. Why is this? Well, let's look back a little bit. Quick history lesson on whey protein. Before it was sold to athletes, the dairy companies actually had to pay to get rid of their whey powder because it was polluting to rivers. So then they kind of worked out, well, we can probably recycle this into the business. They started to use it as feed for the cattle. And then someone worked out, do you know what? We can probably get athletes to pay a lot more. That's the whey protein story, right? But beyond this, you've got all the downsides of dairy. You've got the increased inflammation, the increased acidity, the degalactose. All of those things are going on. All the downsides you've got with milk, cheese and yogurt, you've got them with whey powder. But on top of that, whey powder is never going to come from the best quality milk out there. It just makes no business sense for anyone producing it because it's a cheap product to make. You don't use your highest quality organic milk to turn into some powder with sweetener in it, which is all whey protein is. If you are thinking about this and thinking, but how on earth will I get enough protein? This is the subject of a whole separate video, but just a quick diversion into this subject is that we're all getting more than enough protein as it is. The kind of idea that we're not getting enough and that we must have loads more within an immediate certain window, otherwise we'll get weak and slow and the big boys will kick sand in our face, largely a construct of the whey protein industry, funnily enough. It's sold an awful lot of products, it's been a very powerful message. So much so that I'm sure there are plenty of you watching this going, yes, but what about the protein? So I'm coming to that. All food contains protein to some degree or another. I mean, let's face it, cows don't drink milk or eat meat. They eat grass and they turn that into protein. So if you, when you're eating any whole foods, you're getting protein. But am I getting enough? Okay, so the average UK adult is already eating 74 grams of protein a day, as opposed to the daily recommended amount of 55 grams for an adult. This is average adults. This is not someone focusing on their training. These are people who are not focusing on their diet. They are not focusing on their training. they're just eating kind of the average UK diet, and they are getting almost 50% more protein than we need as it stands. Now, as an athlete, let's say if you're a 70 kilo athlete, you might be wanting to go for about the recommendations at least would say, well, you want a gram of protein per kilo of body weight. Well, as you can see, that average UK adult who's already getting 74 grams of protein without thinking about it is quite enough for a 70 kilo athlete. So basically, all you got to do is be conscious of a need for a little extra protein around training time, and make sure there's some on your plate, whether you're going to get that from lentils, nuts, beans, peas, or whether you are going to get it from quality meat and fish, if that's your thing. So there we have it. That is the wild world of dairy and athletic performance. Hope you found that one useful and thought-provoking. And look, let us know what your experience has been. Have you tried to give up dairy? Do you think this is all a load of old nonsense? Are you sticking with your milk, or are you someone, we hear from a lot of athletes who had problems, whether it was stomach issues or immune function issues or skin issues that cleared up when they went off the dairy. So let us know in the comments below, or drop us a line on any of the social media channels that we're on, as well as our email. You'll find all of our contacts in the show notes below. And on top of that, of course, if you are looking for the finest in sports nutrition for your endurance performance, whether it be running, triathlon, or cycling, why not check us out? You'll find us at 33shake.com.